All right, welcome City of Newberry Planning and Zoning meeting for this February 4th, 2019. First thing we'll do is get approval of the agenda. Has everybody looked through the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Mr. Mayor, can you lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, as you can see, according to our agenda, we've got a chock-packed meeting tonight, just full of all kinds of things. So strap in and let's get started. All right, has everybody looked over the minutes for December 2018 meeting? Has anybody got any questions or see anything that needs to be changed or regarding the minutes?
The December minutes or the January?
December minutes for the P&Z.
On the agenda it says approval of the January.
That would be for the HARB.
Okay, I'm sorry. I missed the last meeting. I'm kind of behind.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Got a motion?
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, motion passes. Minutes are approved. All right, we have no announcements, and we have no old business. So it takes us to new business, which we have none. So at this point, we're going to open the floor for discussion from the board members. Got anything, Bill? Nope. Nine?
Did the city ever find out about making it easier for the approval process for like people's backyards? Remember, I think it was like a few meetings ago. Remember?
Metal roofs and expediting.
Yeah, expediting. Have we looked into anything like that?
Legal was going to look into expediting some of those things, empowering staff to approve those rather than having them do it.
Mr. Mayor, we are looking at amending the LDRs to provide a little bit more administrative discretion under certain circumstances for relatively minor types of what would now require variance would be shifted over to basically the LDR administrator would have the authority under certain guidance, under certain criteria to approve those without having to bring it before the board.
That's it. I just wanted to follow up with the city.
Yes. All right, I have nothing. Mr. Mayor?
Well, I'll go ahead and take this time to announce that we're having a farm share event this Saturday. We are always in need of volunteers. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning. We've got it down to a fine science where it's a drive-through. So we have, I think last time we fed 500 families, and we started feeding at 9 and we were done by about 11. So if you are out there listening, or if you're sitting up here on the dais and you've got some time Saturday morning, you don't have to stay for the whole thing. We'll take you for an hour. We'll take you for the whole 4 or 5. Whatever you can give us, we would certainly love to appreciate it. And of course, anybody that's out there that is in need, we'll start handing out the food at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we hope you join us there at the American Legion. Thank you.
And I did want to make one announcement. I meant to do this at the beginning. Wanted to announce that Wanda is sick. Miss Wanda is sick, so she wasn't able to be here this evening. So, does legal have anything?
Nothing from staff.
All right. Well, this lengthy meeting, woo, is adjourned. Did you need a moment to do something, or are you taking care of that now? You're okay? All right. Welcome to the City of Newberry Historic Architecture Review Board meeting on Monday, February 4th, 2019. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes for tonight? Are there any changes, any questions? Or agenda? Talk about minutes.
Motion to approve the agenda as is.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Aye. All right. Motion passes. Now, did everybody get a moment to review the minutes from January?
Move approval of January minutes.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. All right, we have no announcements, and does not look like there's any old business, which takes us to the new business. We have a discussion, which is the appointment and composition of the Historic Architectural Review Board relative to Florida's Certified Local Government and Main Street programs. Is Wendy presenting this, or?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Our principal planner, Wendy Kinzer, will be presenting this item.
Okay.
Good evening. Are we on? Tonight, I'm Wendy Kinzer, Principal Planner for the City of Newberry Planning and Economic Development Department. And one of the items that we're discussing that's been coming up a lot, so we thought we'd bring it before you and go over some of this with you, is the makeup of the Architectural Review Board as well as the makeup of the Planning and Zoning Board and how it all relates to historic preservation and the Newberry Main Street, and the fact that the City of Newberry participates in the Certified Local Government Program. So what I want to just go over with you is essentially the Florida Division of Historical Resources has a couple of programs, the Certified Local Government Program that the City of Newberry participates in, and the Newberry Main Street that participates in the Florida Main Street Program. There are certain requirements for each of those programs. The Certified Local Government, which the Newberry we've kept that up each year and been certified, but that links together the federal and state and the local programs to be able to identify the historic preservation importance in the important properties, the importance of it to our community, and to kind of talk about everybody getting involved and knowing their history. And it was started as part of the National Historic Preservation Act. Requirements for participation in the CLG program are numerous, as far as just reporting, letting them know the makeup of the Historic Architectural Review Board, that we have a Planning and Zoning Board, that we have active participation, that we keep up our survey, and all those things that have to do with historic preservation, notifying the State Historic Preservation Officer of any actions that are taken here, just to keep that really about the database, keeping that up to date and informed for the state, but especially for your local community, so that they're informed with their own history and they can keep that alive. And then the Florida Main Street Program, the purpose of that, providing technical assistance with the goal of revitalizing our historic downtown, keeping the economic vitality of the community going. So it's not just downtown, but it is about the historic preservation of that area. Essentially that it has a goal of revitalizing historic downtowns and encouraging economic development within the context of historic preservation. And it really does contribute to creating jobs, saving tax dollars. You have tax incentive programs, and it does build community pride. National Main Street Performance Standards. There are numerous things that they have to comply with. Sorry, my mouth's dry. And some of those things are really being active in the historic preservation program and in their downtown, maintaining that, helping with that, your local businesses, keeping them going. But it's all in that historic preservation, historic district context. So you want to have active board members. You've got to have, you've had to be very active in your program. So you have some of this information in your packet, and we can make more of that available to you. But essentially, the ongoing training, making sure that people are involved in that whole national Main Street network, it also makes it available so that you can get certain kinds of funding that are available to the city that might not be available otherwise. They set aside pots of money for the Certified Local Government Program out of the other monies that when they're available for grants. So that's another thing, and that becomes available to both the city and to the Newbury Main Street as a nonprofit. So in looking at that and knowing that they need to be more involved in our historic preservation practice, looking at our own code, we have the designation of the Planning and Zoning Board as our historic preservation agency, and they're supposed to serve, according to our code in 3.13, that they'll serve as the city's historic preservation agency, and that's to meet all the requirements of Article 11, which is historic preservation. So essentially the P&Z, Planning and Zoning Board, in that hat, also serve as the Historic Architectural Review Board under that policy. Then when we go to Article 11 in the Historic Architectural Review Board, and it says that board is designated as the Historic Preservation Agency, and these are all in compliance with we have federal, state, local laws and requirements that I have plenty that I can send you later if you'd like some good reading. But that whole idea of having the City Historic Architectural Review Board making these decisions, they have a certain makeup of that board. So in looking at what the regulations say for the Planning and Zoning Board, and knowing that you're wearing that same hat to do both, you have the same people up here, but the Planning and Zoning Board says we need 6 residents, 5 are appointed, we have the 1 non-voting ex officio member, and then you can also have the 1 school board representative as well. They're non-voting, and no member, of course, of the Newbury City employees. And then the Historic Architectural Review Board can be at least 3, no more than 7 members, and for that, they're all residents. And then also you can have additional members. You can have non-residents that can provide that expertise for you, the architectural and historic preservation that you might not have on your board otherwise. And then they have, in our code, there are specific types of positions that would be best, and it only says if possible. So if we were able to have the ideal world and say that we had all the different kinds of expertise, it says that the composition, if possible, would be the board members would include a city resident at large and a property owner from a historic district, and then an architect, a contractor, real estate broker, or attorney, a city resident at large, I just said, a representative of the Chamber of Commerce, and a member of the Planning and Zoning Board. So if we had enough people to do both those boards, you could fill that, try to fill those kinds of positions. The point being, why we're here tonight, is knowing that Newbury Main Street is such an integral part of our workings in the city, because all of our historic preservation efforts are to work together with the city and the Newbury Main Street, and that goes through the Certified Local Government. As you saw, the Certified Local Government Program and the Main Street Program, among other programs, are all under the Division of Historical Resources. So, and they're all they're all coming from the same ultimate law and governing language that's telling you how to run things. But now your local government really gets to decide what's happening here. So what we want to do is bring to you for your consideration is, would you want to entertain having a member of the Newbury Main Street organization as a member of the Historic Architectural Review Board? that could be a part of those reviews, because they have to, they're such a big part of maintaining the historic integrity of the downtown and the larger area there in our district. So, but I wanted you to know what the composition requirements are, that we're not quite there anyway. And you could, if you thought maybe you want to have a person who has some kind of expertise, we could try to get someone like that to just come and help, to sit on the board with you as well. That is your option. We can look at that as well. That's already in your code. So the part about saying that they want someone from a property owner in the historic district, most of the people in the Newbury Main Street are property owners or business owners in that district as well. So you could either add a requirement that says that you have a member of Main Street always on your board. You could say you want to look into splitting up the board and seeing how many people we can get that would be available to serve as that board, and we would go through the code changes. Or if you are interested in getting anyone to sit on the HARB, has any expertise, the point is we're going to need to be more active. And we want to do that to help the Newbury Main Street, to make funding more available, and for this community to ensure that our history is preserved and that the story is always told. So I hope that isn't too confusing, but if you have any questions, also we have a representative from Main Street here, Peggy Loy, who can certainly answer questions for you as well. Maybe.
Mr.
So,
Chair.
I don't know if that's...
Wendy, are you suggesting that HARB is about to become so busy that the P&Z board and the HARB should be peopled with different people entirely? Are you just putting that out there for...
I'm just putting that out.
I'm curious what we're going to become so busy on.
No, I'm
It would take
Mayor,
a
I'm
whole
putting
other
that out
board.
there.
Okay. And
It's just that there's not the expertise on the board as far as that, and so we're just bringing that forward about Main Street, but I wanted you to be aware of, the different requirements in our code, what's going on with these other programs.
Sure. And
So-
are you asking that the Main Street person serve as a liaison, or as a non-voting liaison that could take ideas back and forth between Main Street, or would this person be a voting member of the board and their vote represents Main Street? I'm a little curious what
Yeah.
to make of it. I mean, I'm a non-voting ex aficionado. I can liaison between the P&Z and the commission, but I don't have I don't have another board. I'm just there to pass information along. What's the relationship? If we put someone from from Main Street on the HARB, what would the relationship there be?
That would be something that you choose yourself. Now, in other jurisdictions, sometimes they have a Main Street member as a voting member. Sometimes they have them as a liaison to inform the others. So it's whatever you would like to do. But so the person would serve on the HARB, not the P&Z. But when I say that we're going to have more
Sure.
activity, it really isn't about, at this point, people coming in and having applications and wanting to do too many of those kinds of things. We will have some new ones coming, but it's more about we have to review it's time to have a new survey. It's time to look at some of these things with the historic aspect, and other stories need to be told. So if anyone comes forward and wants to do a special project or some kind of preservation plan, there are those opportunities. And as Main Street gets more involved, we're going to do more public outreach like we were doing several years ago, just to keep people so that they are aware of things that are available for them, or just to know about your community. Some of that's already happening.
My last question, Mr. Chair, is if Main Street is really strong right now, but it's been a rocky road. Let's say that the group of volunteers that they have now decide that they are ready to hang it up, and we no longer have a Main Street. If we've written it into the resolution that HARB has to have a member for Main Street, is that binding the city's hands to then support Main Street, to make sure that there always is a Main Street, because there has to be a member of Main Street on the HARB?
I would suggest that you do it right now the way your code's written. It says that that composition of members and it's a wish list. I'd like to have an architect, like to have somebody living in the district, like those kinds of things. Add the Main Street as one of those, so that way
give a member of Main Street preferential application
We could look
status.
at that and see what, you know, what would fit the best, but they're all not required. In other words, unless, you know, you're seeking to make something required, but I understand that point. We're seeing Main Street do wonderful things now, and it's just a matter of, we want to see some longevity.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I may, is there a requirement, let's say right now one of us on the board decides to join Main Street as a member? If one of us would be so willing to join and volunteer in the efforts of Main Street, helping them out, then that would automatically just take care of that void per se. Or do they have to be an active
Well,
volunteer member for a year, 2 years? Is there a,
Well, I think that I'm a member of Main Street, although I haven't been billed for a little while, just saying. But when I became the mayor, I asked Commissioner Glanzer to become the liaison. So it's been a year since I've actually gone to a meeting for Main Street. So I think that's a good point, but I think we'd want to make a differentiation between, because there's a lot of people who are just, you know, they pay the check to be members, but the people who are sitting at the board talking, you know, it's a smaller group.
If I may. Besides being a member of Main Street, we've been recently been giving additional training in historic preservation through the Department of State here. We had a meeting here. Jessica, you were there, but I don't think anybody else in this group came to that. Sorry, Jordan. Walt. So, and this past weekend, we had quite a bit additional training from Megan, thank you, who is the director of the program, the coordinator for the state of Florida with this. And so, and they're also having additional training throughout the state of Florida with 2-day sessions. So it's more than just being a member of Main Street. I think it's somebody who's being able to have some of this training. The training is really very good, and it's not onerous, but it would be nice to have some people on the board who had some additional training in that, because there are a lot of things I didn't know, things you're not supposed to do, things you can do, things to look for, things that can make your community better. But I was just kind of like, okay, I didn't know about that. And see, sometimes we make mistakes, but we're doing it because we don't know better.
Mr. Chair.
What is staff's interaction with Main Street on behalf of the HARB at this point?
On behalf of the HARB,
Yeah, do you have any interactions with Main Street
Well-
on behalf of HARB?
I haven't thought of it that way, but could very well be more so that way. I'm the liaison from Main Street with staff, but that's more, we work together. Our Planning and Economic Development Department work with Main Street, and we'll be doing more. Used to work a lot, very closely with them to have more of these programs going, and the Florida Main Street program wants this to be happening. So what you're asking, as a staff person, we can certainly keep them informed. We do send them the information. We'll make sure that they know about any items on the agenda, keep them informed, keep the whole group, so that the more people know, the more heads together on all these things, the better.
Like I was thinking about what Mr. Mayor said, and I don't want to tie a future city commission into having to fund something that might fall apart.
This is not related to
Okay.
that at all. This is about a separate nonprofit entity that has nothing. I mean, they have to be reviewed as a nonprofit, totally separate from the city. The fact that there are any discussions about leasing a building or getting some funding is just like any nonprofit going to you, but they have a special status because of how they are thought of in the state and their ability to work with the cities on the preservation efforts. So, and because they work with the downtown business community. But the intent is not to bind, we don't want to bind anybody in any way, except to say we want to see the Main Street ability to be involved in this on the board, because it's something that they're looking from the Florida Main Street and the National Main Street programs, to be able to see that the Main Street community, the Main Street boards are involved on at that level in their community. So you wouldn't have to say, you know, you have to do this, but it would be nice to include them as one of the
I definitely
members.
want to include them. I think they're great for our community.
So you would be bringing back forward an amendment to your code, so you would come back before the Planning and Zoning Board and to the City Commission to vote that, to make any changes that way. And certainly in the meantime, welcome them to attend. But it is something that will still go through. I just wanted direction from you. We want to know what you think about this idea and whether we should take the time to bring forward an amendment to you.
Mr. Chair.
Hang on a second. Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to reiterate that if you did change it, there would be no obligation on the city's part to maintain a relationship with Main Street if something changed in the future. Looking backward a little bit, I mean, one of the reasons that that we went back and amended the code to allow the Planning and Zoning Board to serve as the Historic Architectural Review Board was because about 4.5, 5 years ago when we made that change, it's because we were having a hard time getting people to serve on the HARB. Main Street was at a low point. They were not very active. And in the intervening time, they have built the organization back. They've become a lot more active. And one of their staff was bringing this forward as an option just because one of the primary functions of a well-functioning Main Street is historic preservation and downtown redevelopment. And so we thought you might see it as an opportunity to get a little bit extra expertise. As Wendy pointed out, ideally we would have an architect on the HARB who has experience in historic preservation. We'd have a number of other positions, but in a small town like this, it's often the case where it's difficult to seat all those positions with people from the community. And so that was mainly we were looking at this as a potential opportunity to bring an organization in that has become active again, that may have some additional expertise in historic preservation issues.
Mr. Chair, Wendy mentioned something about funding, and I remember one of the contentious issues we had in the past was that the state historic preservation people were telling the city that we had to fund Main Street enough to pay the salary of a full-time paid director. And the city rejected that, and it became very contentious politically to where the Main Street director ran for city commission, and the Main Street director and the two commissioners that supported her were all voted out of office by the people, sending a very strong message to the city that they did not want Main Street to be funded by the city. They wanted it to be a volunteer organization, at which time the commission dropped the funding to the organization. It became all volunteer. We got some new people in there, and it has steadily climbed up to be the great organization that it is today. And I'm very much a supporter of the current Main Street organization and the wonderful things they're doing downtown. But I feel like the ordinance that, I don't know if it's ordinance or a resolution that outlines how we staff the HARB already leaves us, it has a minimum number of members, but there's no maximum, and it recommends that we have people with architectural background, people with expertise in historic preservation. It sounds like Main Street is becoming one of those people. They've had training. So we certainly have openings without changing any code, or I don't know if it's in the LDRs, anything about Main Street or the HARB, but it's...
Mr. Chair, Mr. Conrad's absolutely correct. We already have the latitude to appoint somebody from the Main Street organization without making a specific amendment. If you wanted to solidify it even further, then you would direct us to bring back an amendment, but we shouldn't have any problem with appointing.
This is an all-volunteer organization. It's been difficult to get people to sit, but if we've got anybody that's willing to sit on this board as a volunteer and they want to submit an application to the commission, I think the commission would welcome that application. Well, I don't think we need to send a message. If Peggy wants to join, or if you can find somebody that's an architect that wants to join, I don't think there'd be any objection to anybody under the current rules and regulations to bringing those people on board.
Mr. Chair, the HARB says you really, your regulations are at least 3 up to 7 members, and you can have 2 non-residents who do have some kind of expertise. And then you can appoint those people to the board as well. So the idea of including a member from Main Street, you know, as long as you want to recognize that, we can, you know, make that happen. It's just, we just want to make sure we want to have some recognition of that and have some active participation. So,
Well, it really doesn't sound like we need to do anything except have a volunteer from Main Street to fill out an application and submit it.
however, the planning, okay, yeah, so you're right. I think you're right.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I'm a firm believer. You know, if it works, don't fix it. And I think that Main Street is a great organization. I stand behind them. I love what they've done for the city. I love Miss Peggy and her crew. I think they're fantastic. But I also think that to put something in writing, to bring it before a commission, make it this, you know, this should be this way. I would want to invite first a volunteer from them to apply, just to apply, like what we were saying. I don't think there's any rule saying that they can't sit on a board without this being on there. So why are we gonna? I rather, in my understanding here, I rather have the option than to be completely secluded. This is how it has to be, kind of deal. I rather than volunteer, say, hey, we want a member on the board. Well, come on in. We have an extra spot. Versus saying, yeah, we need to have one. I'd rather have the option open, if I may. So I do welcome, you know, we like Conrad said, it's been hard to get applicants in there, let alone try to get 2 or 3 from outside of Newberry to try to drive out here
Right.
to sit for a volunteer
agree.
position.
You can't even get a school board member to show up.
That's
Yeah.
planning and zoning board.
I know.
But Mr. Chair, just so you know that that's perfect. The main thing is that we want to have, you have the recognition of that Main Street wants to be involved, that we do want someone involved, so to have them submit an application. But we wanted you to be aware of how much the Main Street program and certified local government programs work together, and that's a real big part of what we do with the HARB. And one other point, just to make sure you know that there is no, the Florida Main Street program, the National Main Street programs, neither require the city to pay at least not any time now. I mean, maybe they did years ago, but there's no requirement for them to pay any salary.
There's still that requirement.
So, no, there's not.
They're changing it.
You know, because
For
we're
the-
over 5,000,
Right.
even though these people really aren't part of Newberry, but because we're over 5,000, they say we need a full-time director. Well, they're changing that population requirement so that
Can you step
Newberry
up to the
will be-
mic, Miss Peggy?
Yeah.
Just in case there's
And-
folks at home listening, I wanted to hear. Because I know that Main Street and I have had many conversations about, hey, Tallahassee's reminding us and.
Well,
we're
of course,
supposed
there are
to
new
have a-
directors up there now, too.
Right.
But they're changing the population requirements because at the current time, because we're over 5,000 population, they require a full-time director. Because they're changing that number, we will become in the category of part-time director. And also, we've had verbal assurance from the new director that there is no requirement for the amount of compensation for that person.
Doesn't have to be fair market value.
It does not have to be fair market value. It doesn't have to be anything in particular. And so we're allowed to establish how that will be. And so we do now have a part-time director, executive director, which is required by the state.
Who's the
In
part-time
fact,
director?
Louise Smith she did a terrific job on the festival, organizing all the PR work. More work than I wanted to do, but she did very well at that. But the state had gotten to the point where, because of the non-compliance with so many things, that we were in jeopardy of losing Main Street here. But it seems that we've been trying to go to all the meetings, these 2-day meetings they have quarterly, and participate in the phone conversation, et cetera. to make sure they understand that we are interested in trying to keep Main Street here in Newbury. But
Mr.
we
Chair,
will.
I'll ask Peggy a question too. Is there a benefit to Main Street of Main Street being written into a resolution of the makeup of this board to show their involvement, or is it just if a member of Main Street happened to be on the board, that would satisfy someone in Tallahassee saying, yeah, look, Main Street's really involved?
I would think that would be, it was my intention to apply, like we do for all committees here, and it was suggested I come to this meeting because there was something else going on. But that was my intention all along. I don't know that it needs to be required.
Written
I mean,
into
right now we
resolution.
have suggested kinds of members that ought to be on this committee, and we either can get them or not as people volunteer. But no, I think having someone apply, or more than one or more people apply, would be sufficient. I think the state just wants us to be more involved visually with the community, so they see we're working on these different committees. Some people are working on them already, but this is just another way. And anyway, this is interesting.
Mr. Chair, I mean, I think you could maybe add Main Street to the list of, hey, we would love to see an architect, we would love to see this. And I'm not sure I understand if the suggestion is to turn this into a 6-member board and invite one more person up, or simply to wait for somebody to, we have an election coming up, there's 2 or 3 seats on this board. Perhaps people are ready to retire, I don't know, so I'm not sure what the actual, are we thinking about making the P&Z still is 5 because that's done by resolution, but making HARB just adding one more? I'm not sure what's the thought. I don't know if staff has a suggestion or if the board just needs to kick that around.
Mr. Chair, the HARB is, when you put on that hat, you're a totally separate body that has nothing to do with Planning and Zoning Board.
I know.
So,
I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. P&Z is done by resolution. That's why I'm asking, is staff making a suggestion that we turn this into 6 members? Or is staff saying, hey, when seats open up, let's see if we can make sure a Main Street person applies, and then go to the commission and say, hey, we have this list of recommendations here, and this person needs this recommendation.
you already have that ability because you can have up to 7 members for your HARB. So, like, we just wanted to make sure that if someone else would like to serve, then that person can come along and
That's
add
my
to your
question. We're
group
not
and sit in
communicating
on that
very well.
meeting.
That's what I'm asking. Do you
So it
guys
doesn't
want us to add
require-
one
We
more?
actually
We just want
have
feedback.
2 empty seats. We have 2 open seats right now on this board.
Yes.
And if we can get 2 bodies to sit in them,
Great.
I'm good with it.
Okay.
Especially if we can get somebody from Main Street.
Okay, that's
How
good.
long, Mr. Chair, how long would it take if we actually considered changing the section? How long would that take to work through?
It would be advertised and go to your next Planning and Zoning Board meeting, and then it would go to the next 2 City Commission meetings, or it usually takes about 2.5, 3 months to get through the process.
And we already have 2 open seats.
It's just a matter of getting your thoughts and your direction, and we'll do what you would like to do. Just wanted you to know you can either make it part of the code, amend the code, go through that process, or just make it a policy like, hey, we're inviting everyone, we want you to apply and encourage that participation.
Mr. Chair, I would like to see, with the 2 open seats we have, I would like to see who applies for this, because this is, to me, this is a want position. You want to have this position. You go after it. You physically apply for this. So I would like to see and encourage those to come forward and apply for this position. Yes, you get asked, but at the same token, you don't have to take it. So it's a kind of a want. You want to be part of the city. You want to see the growth. You want to be part of this board. So I would like to encourage, if we have those members out there, to come forward, fill out an application, because at this point, you know, we don't have a lot of activity like Mr. Mayor was saying. What, is there a floodgate of things that are happening right now? And there's not. So this is a perfect opportunity to say, let's, you know, we don't have to make any kind of moves. Let's invite those 2 open seats to be filled, if that's the case. And we would prefer somebody at the moment from Main Street. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to clarify though that I don't think people understand that there are 2 open seats, because it says it's up to 7, but we've only appointed, the city commission has only ever appointed 5. And I know of one applicant who applied for just the historical architectural board, and their application was sifted out because it wasn't for both. So, you know, we've got to make sure that, I mean, if we have 2 open seats, then we should advertise we have 2 open seats, and not, I mean, nobody's going to apply if it's not posted as open.
Mr. I think that was why I was trying to ask the question, what are we envisioning here? Because I think that the commission is under the impression that the P&Z is the HARB, and you get 5 people to serve on the P&Z, and those 5 people will also serve on the HARB. And I don't know that staff has ever necessarily presented it to the commission and said that you guys have the ability to appoint within the resolution as it stands all the way up to 7. That maybe because there's only so many chairs. So they're thinking, okay, I got 5, it's hard to get 5 people. I got 5, they're already here. You know, there may be some confusion with trying to get someone to, because not every night do we have a HARB when we have a P&Z. So there may be 3-4 months that go in between someone having to come here to serve on the HARB. So I don't think that, yeah, I could see staff saying to someone the HARB is already full because P&Z is full, and that's just kind of the mentality that that has been taken. I think that it would probably help Main Street more if we actually go through the process of putting Main Street into the resolution as a preference. I'm not sure what the commission does with those preferences when the applications come in. You know, we have a list of preferences for just about every board we have on, and each commissioner uses that list of preferences in his or her own way to make the decision of who to actually end up appointing. I think absolutely I could convey to the commission that you guys really want to get someone from Main Street, and they would respect that. But I think it would be beneficial for Main Street to actually have it written in. That way they could send it to Tallahassee and say, see, we're on the list of preferred background experiences, and I've got an application in, you know, got my fingers crossed.
Miss Wendy, did you say that Main Street was already on the suggested list?
Not in the code, doesn't list Main Street. It says someone who lives in the district, and gives specific, look at my list, but.
I know you said outside.
You can all, the code provides for you the ability for the commission to appoint 2 people from outside that are not residents, not non-residents who have expertise in historic and architectural review. I mean, the key could probably be and also when advertising these boards is advertising them so it's more clear that they have different hats. So you've got the Planning and Zoning Board and Historic Architectural Review Board, and if we're going to have them still serve the same in both positions, that there are 2 other positions available, like Naim said.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose that the Historic Architectural Review Board or staff, on behalf of the HARB, draft up a letter to the City Commission saying that, pointing out the code and the fact that we have 2 available seats to be appointed, and tacking on to what Jessica said about apparently somebody applied and it was passed over. Maybe somebody in the staff didn't understand that there were empty seats, and they should have put that application in front of the City Commission to be appointed. But anyway, I'd like to draft up a letter and have Mr. Chair sign it to the City Commission, pointing out that we do have 2 vacancies, and we'd like them to advertise for those vacancies and specifically say that we would like an architect or someone with experience in architecture, someone with experience in historic preservation or Main Street member to apply, and maybe we can get some advertising out there and get those seats filled and build up the the vitality of our board a little bit.
I'm good with that. I just don't feel like we need to have a resolution as long as we're sending guidance to the city commission of what we're looking for.
So I'll put that in the form of a motion that we draft up such a letter, and
Okay,
I don't know if
do
we need to
a
look at it
motion for
again.
this? Or is this, are we just gonna direct staff?
Send
or-
a letter. But if you want me to just convey that, then no. But if you want staff to write a letter,
If
I
we
say
want
you need a
staff to write a
motion.
letter, then we need a motion.
I would.
I would agree.
Do you wanna put that in the
To
form of a
clarify,
motion?
this isn't opening up PNCs. Just to clarify, I'm sorry, you can,
Yeah. Did I say P and Z? I meant.
no, I just wanted to clarify that this doesn't open for P and Z to have 2 seats as well. This is
No.
2 seats only for the heart.
Strictly for the HARB.
Okay, sorry.
Because it sounded like a mistake was made and somebody applied specifically for the HARB and didn't get looked at by the commission. And that's sad because I know there was somebody that applied that had a lot of planning and zoning experience at one time. But at any rate, yeah, I would like to make a motion that staff draft up a letter making our intentions clear to the city commission, and we can look at it at our next meeting and have the chair sign it, send it on to city commission if it's the will of the board.
I would second his motion.
We got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion from the audience?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Where did that leave putting it into the language that architect, historical experience, I mean, that doesn't bind
Sounds like it's already in the language. The code you talk about, that's the LDRs?
Yeah, the only thing that we would be adding to it would be the preference for
For
a
Main
member of
I didn't
the
hear Main Street in the actual
And
language.
it wasn't, but Bill,
Right.
when he made the motion originally, before it was a motion, mentioned the Main Street in that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
he just mentioned it in a letter saying we'd like you to consider someone for Main Street.
yeah.
Correct.
And I think we should
The preference.
put the word Main Street in there, and if the language says an architect or a historic preservationist, that we put in there that we consider Main Street to be historic preservation expertise.
Yeah, I think that my question at the beginning of the night was, it sounded like staff was saying the HARB had to have a member of Main Street, and then that would create potentially a problem later on if
No.
it wasn't a Main Street. But just to add Main Street to a list of, these are the things that we would prefer, I think there's nothing binding there. But I think it's more beneficial to Main Street if that's actually in the language of the resolution. And it's certainly not pressing, we could kind of work it through the process. I just wanted to throw that out, because I didn't hear that in Bill's motion. It sounded to me like just send a letter to the commission saying, we have 2 open seats, we want you to advertise it, and we wanted that advertisement to say that we prefer, these things
I'd like it
there.
to say Main Street in there.
Right, but that's not the actual,
As one of our preferred
right.
people.
I'm talking about the actual resolution, the makeup of
Right, and
the
that's not
HARB.
on the list, even
Right.
historic preservation isn't on the list of preferences.
So the actual list that's in there, it just says that the composition should, if possible, include a city resident at large and a property owner from the historic district, and an architect, a contractor, real estate broker, or attorney, a representative of the Chamber of Commerce, and a member of the Planning and Zoning Board, which is the group that's serving in this capacity. So adding probably Main Street
I
or
mean, it's up to
like
this board,
any
I
of
just
those.
was throwing that out there, because
Yeah.
that's not, in my hearing of the motion, that wasn't included in the motion. It was the advertisement, but not in there.
Mr. Chair, and I think, I'm not sure that the letter would necessarily negate adding language, but I think it would be helpful if fellow board members are against putting Main Street per se in the language, that we should definitely add someone with experience in historic preservation.
Well, it would be odd to be against having language in the resolution, but for putting it in the advertisement.
Well, right,
Yeah.
I
Hopefully.
agree.
All right, so,
I agree with 2 versus 1, honestly, because 6 voting members versus 7 is a lot. Gets a little difficult.
You lost me on that, Matt. 2%. Well, you have a motion on the floor, so you
we have a
need
motion,
to ask
we
the
have a motion,
maker of the motion
and we
to
have a
amend.
second. Do we have a of the motion want to amend at all?
Well, that would be a
Or-
pretty big, what we're saying, instead of writing a letter, what I hear people saying is you want to change the LDRs to add a line to that, the paragraph that's quoted here in the package, to add a line that says a historic preservation expert or a Main Street representative.
It does say if
Historic Main
possible.
Street.
So
If
it says
possible.
shall, if possible. So
Look, can I-
there may be times when this board might not have that if possible.
Yeah.
And it could be that there's two separate. The immediate motion is a letter saying, let's advertise, and then there could be another separate motion that says, hey,
For the resolution.
on the resolution, we'd like to understand that everybody's got probably more important things, but we do want to go ahead and work through and make sure that in the resolution, we're asking for architect, historical experience, historical preservation, Main Street, those kinds of things.
Okay, so I'll change the whole motion, well, let me just pull that motion off the floor, and we'll start over again. And, let's see, we need to do something procedurally to take that motion down, right? And we'll start over again.
Or you
I
could
withdraw
just,
the motion.
you could just move that motion forward, and we'll send the letter, and then someone else could offer a motion
We
to
could do
change the
two
resolution.
separate.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we need to do both. We're gonna change the LDRs, that's gonna get the attention of the commission, and it's gonna accomplish the intent in one move.
Or you could offer a vote, and
Will
everybody
that-
votes no.
Will that
and
still,
goes.
even if we just did the LDR, would that still get an advertisement out there
Call for a vote, and
stating that we got 2 open seats? I don't think that's what that would do.
I'm kind of confused in the simplicity of asking. We have two vacant seats in the Historic Review Board. We would like to see members of the Historic Main Street Committee apply if possible.
Right.
I don't understand why
There's-
we going
There's
around in
nothing-
circles on this.
There's nothing confusing about either one.
Sorry, I'm
There's nothing
just
confusing
like,
about it.
what are we
They're
trying
two
to do
separate-
here?
They're two separate
We're talking
concepts. Yeah.
Two different things going on here that we're trying to conflate into one.
Not after they watch this, right?
Okay?
That's
We
what
want to
it
get a
is.
letter to the city commission. Your letter was perfect, saying, we've got 2 seats, acknowledge that, put an advertisement out. This is what we're looking for. If you can find somebody within this, that would be great. That motion
Okay.
was perfect. I
Okay,
liked it.
sounds like we got 3 of us that like that motion.
And
at least.
then
So
we
let-
have,
Just like
and somebody can make a second motion to amend the LDR to
Okay.
add.
Gotcha. Okay,
Okay.
I stick with my motion on the floor, and
All I want to clarify, though, is that we don't really have 2 vacancies as to how some people look at it. So,
Just have the ability.
right,
We
Right.
have the
So-
ability to add 2 seats.
that has to be,
I think that's been, because it's not that we have vacancies, you just have the ability to go 2 more. So there's two seats available if someone wants to fill them, right?
and we'll put in our own language that we would like them to be an
Right.
architect and a historic preservationist / Main Street
That's a good
person.
clarification, thank you.
So you can vote on that, and then someone else can offer a motion to, hey, let's give Main Street a bump and the ability to go to Tallahassee and say, hey, we're so involved with our city that they are actually going through the process of inserting preferential language there so that we can continue to be involved. And that could be a whole separate motion.
Right. So, are we reinstating your
Yes.
motion?
Yep.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any other discussion for the motion on the floor? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Now, did, we wanna somebody wanna offer another motion regarding the language for the addition of Main Street for 3.3?
I would like to make a motion to amend section 3.3.1.2 to add a 7th item that we also, if possible, have an expert in historic preservation, and if possible, a member of the Main Street program.
I would second that.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any,
Point of,
yes, ma'am?
We're here at the end.
would
now.
you not
Careful.
be directing staff to bring back to you to the Planning and Zoning Board and the City Commission proposed amendment language. So just
That is exactly what I'm making a motion for.
And Mr. Chair, my only comment on that would be to staff, just make sure that that language is clear that this is, if possible, prefer those kinds of things.
Not a mandate.
Yeah.
Now,
Mr.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Mr. Chair, since these 2 seats are not technically vacant in the language, is there anything that we or city can tell us, is there anything that we have to do as board to make these seats vacant or available and make them,
Just the letter to the.
do we have to
city
add to
commission.
Jessica's motion of, to number 7, that we want to go ahead and confirm that 2 seats are now
Mis-
open?
Mr. Chair.
I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, no, basically, if somebody comes in with an application, and unfortunately that, whoever turned in an application for the Harb alone, I wasn't even aware, it probably was looked at as, oh, they wanted to be on the P&Z and the Harb, and the P&Z didn't have an opening, and it was a misunderstanding. But if somebody came in right now with an application for the Harb alone, then it would be up to the commission to say, yes, we want to appoint an additional member, or 2 members if we had 2 applications.
But the letter that we're going to draft, or the staff is going to draft to them, is going to let them know that we have 2 available seats. Not that they're open, but we have 2 available seats.
Is that going to confuse the commission thinking that they think 5 and 5? Like, that's
I
the
would-
mentality
I
that's
more-
out
I
there.
got more faith in the commission.
I have a
to
lot
know
of faith in our
difference.
commission as
And
well,
once-
but-
Once staff says.
But do you know what I mean?
Once
If
staff
they-
says this isn't for planning and zoning, but this is for the historical.
Can
architecture
staff
review.
reiterate to them what we were reiterated today? That
I promise-
P&Z's 5.
I'll do a better job of explaining to them than I've done here tonight, so that we don't go down a rabbit hole.
Right.
But to be quite honest, I don't know. Staff may have talked. I have not talked to the commission about this at all, so I have no idea. If they have a preference. My feeling is that they will not. If you guys are asking for another member and you got a good reason, that they'll look for the person that fits what you guys are asking for. We understand that you guys are volunteers, and we appreciate you. So.
And Mr. Chair, on the current motion on the floor, I just wanted to make a recommendation. We're adding a 7th, an expert in historic preservation. And I believe as the motion was presented, was or a member of Main Street, just making it an 8th category.
Just a long series.
If I'm not
Because
mistaken,
all of those 6 that we currently have are if at all possible, and so it's sort of creating the pool of who we ideally would like to draw from. It doesn't dictate that we have to use
Instead of
any of
being
them.
a 7, it'd be 7 and 8.
well, Mr. Chair, if I wasn't mistaken, earlier Mayor Conrad stated that we would consider an expert in historic would be somebody in the Main Street, correct? Yeah. So there would no need for 7 or 8, because we would consider that expert being part of the Main Street Historic Committee.
But we want to have we want to list it an expert, but we want Main Street to have whatever bump it is that they need to show that they're part of everything. And an expert doesn't have to be from Main Street, so I don't want to tie an expert to simply being Main Street. So I'm thinking maybe that those 2 should be a 7 and 8, just as Jessica had stated it, but instead of being one line, just put them 7 and 8, those 2 same requirements.
Why don't we let staff just bring us some language back and then we'll vote on it? I think they've got the gist of what we've talked about
Yeah.
here tonight. Now, once it's in writing, then we can.
I think,
take it again.
Mr. Chair, as Wendy pointed out earlier, Main Street is administered by the State Department of Historic Preservation, right? So they are a division of a state agency. I'm not sure what the relationship is with the state agency, but it does seem like they get dictated to a lot by the state agency in Tallahassee, telling them you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to come to training. And ultimately, they're going to say, we want you to have a director who is funded by the city, and that's what was the contentious part of Main Street in the past. And I hope that's not a road we're going down again, to try to get more status so they can go back for funding again. But I do applaud the volunteerism that has happened in that organization in the last 5 or 6 years, and I think it's worked out great. And as long as it stays an all-volunteer organization, which is not something the state wants to see us do, but again, I don't think Tallahassee should be running things in Newberry. It's kind of the relationship between the commission and Main Street, and not something where Tallahassee should be making inputs about how we run the organization.
Well, I'd surely like to know what the population break is between their part-time and full-time directors.
5,000.
Well, that's where it was before, she said, but it's changing.
We'll see.
That's
Takes a
what I'm
long
saying.
time for things to change in Tallahassee.
All right, so we've got a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
There goes a short meeting.
Yeah.
All right, so at this point, we got topics from members for discussion. Bill, you have anything?
Yeah, just that I see some of you got the whole package. When I went on the website to get the package, all I had was the agenda. And I didn't get the backup material. I didn't get anything. What's that? Oh, okay. I didn't check out there. But you must have left it today. Really?
It was
I didn't
raining,
get-
because
yeah.
mine's, if you feel it, it's kind
Huh.
of.
I'm sorry. Okay. I didn't get it.
Maybe we could
Sitting there
follow
wet
up
on my
with a
porch.
text or an email. Jenny,
I-
you
I
want
will link
to
both
come
of
up
them,
to
and
the
all I got was
microphone?
agendas. I'll talk it to you afterwards about it, because it looked like Naeem got all the information. Or was that delivered to your porch?
This was delivered to my porch. The other stuff is just other.
Yeah.
If
You
we
didn't,
do-
but you didn't get it, did anybody download it off the website?
No,
You did?
I just got the couple stuff.
Okay, I must be doing something wrong. I'll talk to Janine about it.
Naeem, you have anything?
No, if I'm on the record, I would encourage, we do have another committee opening up, the opiate task force. I do encourage, positions are, I think there's 5 available. Maybe it'll be 7, I don't know. But, I would highly encourage the city to get involved in this. This is a ongoing, epidemic, and it's sad. And we have a great mayor and a great city standing behind this opiate task force, so I would like to definitely see, we have applicants, which is great. I would definitely like to see a lot more applicants, just to show the city, like, hey, we picked 5, but we had 50 to pick from. So, and those voices will be heard. So, thank you.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning the task force. I forgot to do that, and the deadline's coming close. And as I've told everybody, you know, we sort of gravitate to 5 seats because that's kind of all we can fit up here. But every single person that applies for that task force will be able to get involved. I mean, I'm envisioning this breaking off into subcommittees. So everybody that has applied, thank you. Everybody that's downloaded the forms and is going to turn it in this week, I appreciate it. It is an epidemic. The numbers in Alachua County are staggering. The more that you start to study this and look into this, and then the offshoot issues, I want to thank Jessica for helping me this week do some research on some of those offshoot issues. Because at the end of the day, I actually think the opioid addiction is an offshoot of the mental health, and that's creating the opioids and suicide, all kinds of stuff that's going on. And I know we've all heard the president talking about it in other parts of the country, but to know that the numbers are so much higher in Alachua County than they are in the rest of the state is troubling. So I appreciate the support. I appreciate everybody, and I look forward to jumping in and tackling this together, because that's what it's going to take. So, and I should mention that we'll have the State of the City address this Thursday. It's actually a taste of Newberry-Jonesville at 6:30. So come and you have the ability to sample. Lots of folks. At 6 p.m. You're gonna have to help me out here. Am I supposed to be there? That's a different day. That's the 21st. Don't scare me like that. I'm thinking, how many things can we pack into Thursday? Yeah, plenty of time to make those announcements. But we will be having a billboard reveal about the opioid. That's February 21st. At 6 o'clock. So we have County Commissioner Mary Helen Wheeler will be here with us. She's our liaison at the county level for this issue. I think School Board member Eileen Roy is not able to make it. She's our liaison at the school board level. But we'll keep it nice and short and sweet because we know it's going to get dark soon. But we're looking forward to that as well. So thank you, everybody, and thanks for reminding me to make those announcements. Hope to see you at the municipal building, 6:30 or 7 this Thursday.
Looking forward to it.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to see if I could poll the board. Right now, we post the agendas and backup documentation online as well as dropping off packets. I don't know, does everybody still want to get a hard copy packet, or do you?
Yeah, and a lot of times we need the big 17-inch blueprints that we can read, because when you condense them and put them online, I can't read them. So
Just wanted to make sure everybody was still wanted to have the hard copies instead of just the online.
I'd like to see a Mini Cooper roll up to my house. It's pretty cool.
Sometimes it's an old Thunderbird.
Well, can I have another shot?
Yes,
I
sir.
thought of something when Mr. Mayor was talking. Jordan, we've got that big old sign in front of one of our historic buildings, the Doc Corrales place where the real estate, and we got that Lila Leach murder sign that's been up there for a year and a half now. Can we get the sheriff to take that down? That's not something that sends a good message about our town. I think it's got enough exposure that they can take it down and just get that. And not that I wouldn't want anybody that had information about that case to not have a chance to do it, but I think we've had all the opportunities we're ever going to get.
I'll say it was just a political campaign by the sheriff to put that up and get Newberry voters. So I agree with you.
Well, we actually brought that up at the last time the sheriff came out to address it. Commissioner Glanzer brought it up, and the sheriff made it clear that she has every intention of leaving it up for as long as she wants to leave it up. She thinks it's beneficial. She thinks that she's got some leads from it. I think that the person that owns the billboard has been donating the billboard for over a year now, because we made the exact same point. It's been over a year. It's not a nice reminder to drive by every day. We recognize and appreciate that she took that extra step, but there's only so long that is useful for. But she felt fairly adamant. I think that if we could find a customer for that side of the billboard, then
Is there any way the Historic Architectural Review Board could say that is a historic building in our city?
well, I think
and
the
we
sign
don't-
is out of compliance.
Mr. Chair, the billboards actually are non-conforming uses in the city of Newberry. They exceed our size allowances.
That one's
for
licensed
percents.
by the state. It's got a metal license
They,
plate on it.
yes, sir, the state will license them. The state doesn't get involved in whether or not they're compliant with city code. And so as long as they meet the requirements on a state road, they'll continue to license it. I've spoken with FDOT about it and asked them what it would take to have that license removed. And they don't get into the fray there between the city and the owner. But it is a non-conforming use. You might have noticed there was one that fell down in the previous storm, and they were not allowed to put that one back up. So if this one ever comes down, 50% or more of it comes down, as with all non-conforming uses, it's not allowed to be put back up, but until that time. Or if it ever goes unused for a period of 12 months or more as a non-conforming use, then it can't be brought back.
But, Mr. Chair, to take Mayor Conrad's point, I think if the HARB wants to draft a letter that we could bring back and have the chair sign, we could send that. Given Naeem's point, there may be a different response now. So I think a non-public, it's difficult in public to say, okay, I'm going to take it down. We haven't caught the murderer yet, but we're going to try a different avenue. I think if it's a letter that's sent from a historic review board that simply says, I think we've gotten all out that we can out of that, there may be a different response. And like I said, I think that if a paying customer approaches the owner of the sign, I think that the owner would probably say, I've given that to you for 18 months now.
No. Bill Corrales, I think he lives in South
Well,
Florida.
he moved off now, but his family's, yeah. I don't know, many of them live around here anymore, but they were
I've got
here.
his cell phone number. When I talk to him.
Yeah.
They must not might be interested.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, but anyways, drafting a letter is be something that we would have to put on our next agenda to discuss. If that's what we want to do, is have that added to our next month's meeting.
Everybody willing to do that?
Yeah.
No? Do you want to put it on the agenda and discuss it?
We can have an